Thank you so much for having us, Jeff. I'm really excited about being here. I'm also happy that Lucas is here from Browse McDowell. He's an attorney there that specializes in insurance recovery. He's been a great resource to me. And so we thought, it's such an uncertain time for so many people in the insurance world. We have been busier than ever. We have been receiving a lot of different questions from both our business clients as well as personal. And so what we thought we'd do is do a webinar and really focus on those frequently asked questions. What are the calls that we're getting in our office on a daily basis? And we thought we'd bring them to you just to really simplify things. So some things you might have already been thinking about, some may be completely new, but we are going to go through 4 of them. So I'll kind of talk about it from the insurance perspective, and then I'm going to toss it off to Lucas and have him really give his perspective from as an attorney. I'm going to just jump right into the first question. The very first question, and this is the question I would say we are receiving by far the most, is am I covered for financial losses related to COVID-19? The short answer to this is probably not, unfortunately. Like I said early on, we were getting lots of questions from our business clients. And the reason for this is because most of them, like many small businesses in the Mahoning Valley, have insurance policies that cover what we call business interruption. This coverage is important because it is designed to replace lost income in the event a business needs to close due to a covered loss. So that makes sense. So many businesses right now are closed. However, a virus, and especially a pandemic, does not fall under the definition of a covered loss. It's not really news. A lot of our clients really wanted to hear, as I'm sure you can relate. I know this topic has been covered pretty widely in the news, but I would like to summarize it a little bit more and make a few key points. The main reason that it isn't covered is because business interruption is a property coverage, which means that in order for it to come into play, there needs to be a direct physical loss. Examples of this include a fire or a tornado. There are other related coverages as well, and I'm going to pop my screen here. Civil authority, contingent business interruption, just like business interruption, they require a physical loss. And I get the frustration of small businesses, but we need to remember that insurance companies, they are in the business of calculating risk and projecting future losses. Fires and tornadoes are predictable because they've had them before. We know how to handle them. Everyone here would agree that pandemics are not predictable. This is something that I think a lot of people, with the exception of Bill Gates, saw coming. So it's just, there isn't enough data for us to come up with a rate and for us to be able to come up with a policy. I've had many people ask the question, is it something I can add? And the answer is yes, it is available on the market. It's hard to find, it's a little rare, but because it's unpredictable, it is very expensive. So most of the businesses that we work with, the small businesses in our community, it's just not affordable. We'll see down the road if that changes. Now, all of that being said, and I'll ask Lucas to contribute in a minute here. There is pending legislation in multiple states. There are multiple court cases that are challenging the definition of a direct physical loss. The one point I want to make about that is, I think it's going to be difficult for that to happen. That it will eventually make insurance companies pay, because that definition's been redefined. But it's just important to know with that, and we'll see what happens, is that in your insurance contracts for businesses, there's something called a duty to report. What that means is that if you feel you've had a loss, then you are required to report that to your insurance company. So that will come into play if depending on what the courts say. So I'd love, Lucas, if you want to share your thoughts.
Yeah. The perspective I'll add here is that there's currently litigation going on, currently legislation in some states that makes this a live dispute. And because it's a live dispute, you do not want to be left on the sidelines by some sort of technical failure if you could otherwise be entitled to this coverage. So, you know, we've got a lot of people talking to our firm. And again, the policy language matters. That's going to be a theme that I'm going to hit over and over again. Look at your policy. If you think that it's worth it, look at your policy. And the facts matter too. So, you know, we have seen some situations where there is direct physical loss as a result of the virus, and you're able to make a claim and make an argument about that. So as Ellie just said before she threw it to me, make sure that you're not left on the sidelines. Make sure that you do comply with that duty to report. Make sure that you do get your notice in, because the situation is very fluid. You don't know how it's going to pan out, and you don't want to be left without coverage if you're able to have it.
Yes, and I agree so much, Lucas. Take this time, meet with your insurance advisor, meet with your agent to review your coverage. Everyone's situation is different. I think the biggest theme I'm hearing with this is a lot of businesses don't really understand their coverage and what they have. So take the time, really look to see, you know, what do I have? But also I want to make the point that insurance, it is a great tool, but it should be part of a larger risk management strategy for your business. And I think that's what a lot of us are seeing is maybe insurance doesn't come into play here, but you know, these are things we need to be planning for as businesses, as small businesses, myself included. So I'm going to go on to the next question. Like I said, a lot of people are thinking, well, what, you know, am I covered? You know, what, you know, if this wasn't covered on my policy, you know, what else might I be missing? And so the next question I want to talk about is, now that many people are working from home, does my business have the proper coverage? I'm a small business owner as well. We have several locations, and I have about half of our people working from home, half are in the office. And so these are questions that came up for me as well. What, you know, does my business cover it? So I'm not gonna be able to touch on everything, but I do want to touch on some that I think are really important. And the first is cyber liability. This is a big one. Cyber crime is the fastest growing criminal activity in the world. I was reading, let me see if I could read this exact. I was reading today that Google revealed that they had blocked 18 million malware and phishing emails related to COVID-19 per day. This is recent, you know, since we've all been quarantined, 18 million phishing emails a day. And, you know, we like to think of spam as being annoying. In reality, it really poses a serious risk to businesses and has a pretty big financial cost. So if you don't have cyber liability coverage, it is something you need to look at and seriously consider. And so I'm not going to go into that. Jeff and I were saying, I think cyber liability could be a whole webinar in and of itself. So if you want more information, you could go to our website about it. But if you do have cyber liability, here's some important things you need to consider. The policy, cyber liability is fairly new, so there are not a lot of standard forms. So you're going to see big differences in the cyber liability coverage depending on the carrier that you go to. So what you need to do right after this webinar is call, you know, your agent, call your advisor, and find out and ask these questions. Does your policy cover employees outside of your work network? So, you know, we're all safe and secure when we're in the office, but now you're on somebody's Wi-Fi at their home, and does your policy extend to their homes or to their personal devices, you know, their cell phones, anything like that? The next thing is, does the policy limit coverage to equipment that's owned by the business? A lot of policies that cyber liabilities policies you'll find do limit it to company-owned equipment. So, you know, many of us are, you know, we were able to provide computers for our employees. I know a lot of businesses aren't. So if they're on their own personal laptop, does it extend to that? So our employee device is covered. And the last big question is, does your policy require that you back up or encrypt all of your computer systems? a lot of people in your office, that's easier. But now if you're off site, that becomes a lot more difficult to make sure those backups are occurring. So I would definitely ask those questions regarding cyber liability. And if you want more information, like I said, it's on our website. And feel free, I'd be happy to review that for somebody. So cyber liability.
If I can.
Sure,
sorry.
yeah, jump in. Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick to add about cyber liability. There's one more aspect that I always tell everybody whenever they're dealing with cyber liability policy. Pay attention to your application. The application for the cyber liability policy has all sorts of representations that you're making to the insurance company about how you're going to be maintaining your system, and those representations may be affected. In fact, probably are affected by the fact that so much of your workforce is working from home. So just as you're reading the policy, don't forget about that application either. Hold on to it and make sure you review that as you're sort of evaluating what coverage might be available for you for your work from home course.
That's excellent. And you can update that information. So call and let them know. I mean, we have a lot of clients, we're getting questions about telehealth. So physicians, counselors, they're now working with, their clients online. Does their professional liability extend to that? So, or any of their coverage. So another big one is business property. So you're, like I gave the example of my agency, we have computers, phones that are now no longer in the confines of our office, but at somebody's home. Does your policy extend coverage to their homes for the business property itself? Most business policies, unless that's specifically in there, so property off premises, you won't have coverage for your equipment that's in your employee's home. Non-owned auto, it's another big one. Food delivery is the big one that we're really seeing because so many, businesses are now delivering food, even retail or delivering. It's important to note that under in personal auto policies, that business use is excluded. So you want to be sure, one, that you have non-owned auto or that you have some type of business auto policy, but also that it extends to autos that aren't owned by your business. One great thing is many carriers right now have put in a special period of time, it's just for the next few months, where they're actually extending coverage for food delivery. So I will check with your individual carriers to make sure that food delivery is something that's covered.
And Ellie, if you don't mind, we have a question on business property coming in from our social media.
Sure.
Could you please further explain business property? So if you have a company issued computer and that company issued computer is now at someone's home,
right?
What if they also use their personal laptop, say at home, and somehow they end up getting, they log in through the webmail, they end up clicking on a malicious link?
Yes.
A phishing link. Is that person's property covered, and is the business protected even though it was a personal laptop for business use?
So there's a lot there. So we typically recommend that businesses that they don't have their employees use their personal computers, but that, it would be really between. That's a tough one because it would really be between the business and that employee. Technically, if it's employee owned, the business coverage would not extend to that. A lot of homeowners insurance policies do have a little bit of coverage. It's not a lot for business property. Usually it's like $500, $1,000. It's definitely gray, and really that business property would not extend to something not owned by that business. Now that's something they can work out, maybe if it's in the employee contract. I don't know, Lucas, if you have any thoughts on that, because there's some legal issues there and I'm not sure about.
Yeah, and the other big thing that you have to worry about is sort of like how I try to explain it all the time is that like insurance is basically a whole collection of neighborhoods, right? There's the general liability neighborhood and there's the professional liability neighborhood. And you kind of have to know where you are, in which neighborhood you are, to understand what the issues are. The issue that you first, as you first presented it, Jeff, sort of sounds like you might be in the cyber liability neighborhood.
Yes.
That coverage. And as a result of that, you're going to have to look at your cyber liability policy and see what special accommodations they've made for work from home to the extent that they have. And because under a business property policy, they're very the insurance companies are very strict about what happens in which neighborhoods. They have been very, very careful about pushing all those cyber liability risks from the business property, from the general liability policies, from everywhere else to try to push it off into that cyber liability coverage. So that's another aspect that you want to pay attention to.
Yes, that's excellent.
So as a business owner, then you do have to factor that in and have multiple layers of coverage.
Yes. And it's, it's tough, especially for small businesses. A lot of us weren't prepared to have employees start working from home. So we're resourceful and we're jumping in and we're using our personal devices. And, so it is ideally, they should be using equipment that's owned by the business. We've run into situations too where children, so kids in the home or anyone else, are using the business property, because that comes up a lot. So-and-so needs to do their homework. Dad, can I use your computer? And that does pose an issue as well.
And the answer to that is no?
The answer is no. Yeah.
Good luck.
It's hilarious. My son, so I have some multiple dual monitor setup here, and my son keeps coming in and he's like, can you give me one of these setups, Mom? Like, he wants the dual monitors. So I keep him off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right. That's the best practice. As much as it's hard.
It is the best practice.
Yeah, to leave business property is business property, and I have to tell my kids that the same way. This is Daddy's work.
Yes.
Gaming and crashing my computer. So
right. So next question. So my business is now closed, or we're not operating at full capacity. Should I cancel my insurance? As an insurance agent, my answer is absolutely not. But here's why. I mean, there's definitely some important reasons why. One, contractual obligations. So if you have a mortgage, a lease, any supplier or franchisee agreements, a lot of times clients for specific jobs will require it. So I would definitely say, keep it in force. Same thing, vacant property. And now, sadly, when properties are vacant, there are more claims. So there's broken pipes, there's fires. We are definitely seeing business property claims right now. So really, your need for that insurance is higher than it usually is, even higher now. But I do understand. I mean, businesses are struggling. I mean, I talk to them every day. They are struggling. And so there are some ways that you can reduce costs. I have a few listed here. Thankfully, a lot of the insurance carriers are offering payment relief. They're giving you time to pay, whether it's 30 days, 60 days. Personal insurance, they are offering some premium refunds. So, I'm glad that they're really contributing. But there are some things you could do as a business. A lot of business policies are rated that your price is based on a lot of times your gross sales or your payroll. So for a lot of us, gross sales are down. Payroll is down. So you can call your agent, your advisor, and ask them if you can reduce that payroll estimate, which will bring your price down. I did check with all of our carriers. All of our carriers are doing that. I can't say across the board, but I would definitely ask if that's an option. You need to be careful there because, as we're getting back now into the world, we're opening back up, that payroll and the gross sales might go up, and you need to make sure you readjust that, because at the end of the year, when the policy is audited, they will send you a bill for that difference. So you got to be careful there, but it can offer some relief, some financial relief. Vehicles that aren't being driven right now, you can also garage them, take them out of the rotation. Again, be careful there because there won't be coverage. Also, just, the regular things like increasing your deductibles will also provide some relief there. But definitely talk to as you're reviewing your policies, talk to your agent and see maybe there's some coverages that you don't need. Maybe there's some that you really need. But definitely it's a great time to review it. How about Lucas, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I'm an attorney. I represent policyholders in disputes with their insurance companies. And what my job is principally is to make sure that you get the coverage you purchased. I cannot get you coverage you did not purchase.
Mhm.
So if you cancel your policies, or if you, you do something along those lines to try to reduce your coverage, there's always going to be those bubble cases. There's always going to be that thing that happened right on the border of when you canceled or didn't cancel, and you're going to come to me and ask me to try to get you coverage, and I'm happy to do that always. But you just make everybody's life a little bit easier if you keep your coverage in place.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. I think we need to keep it in place, especially as now that we're getting back. I think early on there was a little uncertainty, how long is this going to last? But now that we're back, I think people are going to be thankful that they kept it in force. So our final question is, if we are sued by somebody claiming that they contracted COVID-19 at our place of business, are we covered? I think this is a huge fear for people, especially right now as we're re-entering the workplace. As a business owner, I know it's a concern for me. We want to keep our employees and our clients safe, but it's scary. So much of this is unknown. So how do we know? So the piece of coverage that would come into play here, and I loved Lucas's analogy of the neighborhoods. It is the general liability neighborhood, and thankfully, this is a piece of coverage that most businesses have. This is the foundation of any good business policy, is the general liability coverage. So that would come into play if somebody claimed that they became sick. So general liability covers bodily injury and property damage. So what's important here is that negligence is the primary factor. So you would still have to file a claim if somebody does claim that, but what they will have to prove is that you were somehow negligent. And so what my recommendation here is, while you thankfully will have the coverage in place, you'll be defended, but that Ohio Department of Health came out with their sector specific guidelines. So it's really nice, the Ohio Department of Health website, whether it's a restaurant, an office, they came up with requirements, and they also actually, I have it on the screen. You can see here, they came up with, and this is for general office environments, they did come up with mandatory requirements, and then they also come up with these best practices. So we're advising our clients is you really take a look at these best practices, because I think, if you do have a claim, you're going to be able to show that we followed the best practices. We did everything within our power to make sure that nobody got sick. Sadly, someone did. So I would definitely look at those. They'll also be on our website. Lucas, what are your thoughts on that?
Just sort of picking up on a few things that Ellie talked about. Look, the best claim is no claim. So let's do what we can to make sure that our working environments are safe for our employees, that they're safe for all of us. That just makes good sense. Then it comes to the next level. Somebody does get sick, and through no fault of yours, they become sick, and then they make a claim. So you may be thinking, well, if I didn't do anything wrong, how do I have coverage? Well, the reason you have coverage under general liability policy is you have to think about two principal things. One, there's the duty to defend, and then two is the duty to indemnify. So what does that mean? Duty to defend, if you get sued, they have to hire you a lawyer. Duty to indemnify, if as a result of that lawsuit, you got to pay somebody, the insurance company pays for it. Now, you can just make everybody's life easier by following these guidelines, though. One, because you're doing effective prevention in the first place, and two, because whenever the underlying claim gets litigated, you'll be able to have a good defense to liability, and that will just make everything go a lot smoother. Now, whenever we're in the general liability neighborhood, to sort of keep using that metaphor, whenever we're in that neighborhood, there are still going to be exclusions and that sort of thing that you're going to have to pay attention to, you're going to have to worry about. But by and large, if there is bodily injury or property damage as a result of anything really, unless it's excluded, you're going to be able to have that coverage. And so what you do is you make the notice of claim right away, as we talked about before, because there's going to be all kinds of technical requirements that you need to comply with to make sure that you don't forfeit coverage that you otherwise might have. To be able to do that effectively, You need to work with your insurance professionals in terms of making the claim. Very often, I stay out of these kinds of disputes because they don't become disputes in the first place. The only time that you would need, one of the times that you would need legal counsel is if it comes to the level of the insurance company sending you a letter, something called the reservation of rights letter, or even a denial where they say, we're either not going to defend this claim or accept this claim, or we're going to do it subject to our right to say no later on. Whenever you get one of those letters, make sure that, again, you talk it over with your insurance professional. But in that case, you may want to sort of coordinate with an attorney, contact an attorney that can help you get through the issues created by an insurance company that is less than willing to defend you full bore in your action.
So those are great points. I'm actually sitting here taking notes while you're speaking. Great points though. And, but again, I encourage you, go to that responsible restart. Actually, I'll use my, this responsible restart Ohio, those sector specific guidelines. There's a great Ohio. I mean, we all would agree. I think Ohio's done a great job. Great resources there. I want to tell you about something I found recently, because procuring supplies, finding the supplies to make our workplaces safe is hard. Where we would typically go to get hand sanitizer, masks, automatic soap dispensers, they're not available. They're out of stock. I'm sure a lot of people have found that. And so I discovered recently Ohio does have a PPE exchange. So it is a online marketplace of Ohio businesses that are selling PPE. I was trying to find a stand with an automatic hand sanitizing dispenser, and I found a company in Brunswick that was able to make it, and it's going to be delivered tomorrow. I was worried we weren't going to be able to open on time, and thankfully that resource is there. It'll be on our website, but you can also just go to the Ohio Department of Health website and find that PPE exchange. With that, I mean, those are our questions. I'd love to open up for a Q&A. To tell you, before that though, just to tell you a little bit about our agency. We are Platt Insurance, so we're located with an office in Howland, Sebring, also downtown Youngstown. I think I can see my office in Jeff's background, actually. But we do both personal and business insurance. We specialize in working with small businesses. We also specialize in working with farms. I'm passionate as a small business owner. I started my agency 10 years ago. So I'm really passionate about small business because I am a small business owner. So a lot of the issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis are same things I'm dealing with. So it is something I'm passionate about. We are an independent agency. We work with multiple carriers. I think that's important because we're there to represent you. You know, there's a lot of great carriers out there, but our job is to really understand your needs, find the best policies. The contract language that I've been speaking about, that Lucas is talking about, you want an agent that understands that, and that's what our agency is about. So, you know, I was so excited to do this, and I'm open for questions, and I know Lucas is as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Lucas. This was really extremely insightful presentation. Another question we have, speaking back to the neighborhoods, insurance is a collection of neighborhoods. That's a really interesting way to put it. Very, you know, speaking to how many neighborhoods are there typically for a business owner to consider? Is this a dense neighborhood like a city or urban?
Is that one of the questions? I love that. You know, I'm going to start. I need to use this. I'm going to be using this. I see a series of brochures. Yes, there are some major metropolitan areas in insurance. The big ones would be, and I mentioned sort of that foundation is a general liability policy. So that's going to cover you. And I won't go into detail on each one, but that's going to cover you in case you are sued for any type of bodily injury or property damage. So then general liability is separate from property coverage. So if you own a building, your contents inside that building, that's something separate, another neighborhood. Another big neighborhood is commercial auto. One thing with small businesses we run into is personal use of your vehicle for business. So, and I know because I started a business, when you're starting a business, there's that gray area where you're using you might have a personal auto policy and you think you're covered and you're not. So business use is excluded. Great examples would be if you're a florist, any food delivery, if you're, had an accident while that's happening, pizza delivery driver, that your personal auto policy, most of the time, I shouldn't say all of the time, because personal auto carriers are coming out with endorsements, but I would definitely check with your agent because it's usually excluded. So auto is a big one. Professional liability. So I guess the most common example would be a doctor malpractice insurance. So in the course of providing your whatever your service or whatever, in the course of doing that, if there's a claim brought against you, if somebody said you were negligent, and there's a lot of other reasons, but those are probably the big ones. Lucas, is there anything else you would add?
Yeah, and maybe I missed it if you said it, but the other sort of big foundational one is a business property policy too.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Just to make sure, and once you sort of have these neighborhoods, the reason it's helpful to think about that way is because there are things that can happen in one neighborhood that can't happen in another neighborhood. And the insurance companies are really jealous about making sure that, whenever you have a business property policy and you don't have a CGL policy, which is very, very rare. I mean, your insurance broker is really, really helpful and will make sure that you build out the coverage that you need. But for instance, though, if there's some reason that it's not covered under the general liability policy and you try to sneak something over into the business property policy, they'll be very jealous about policing those boundaries.
Yeah.
So in terms of like any other ones to add on to that, it would be the business property. And then again, as we discussed earlier, I would very much consider a cyber liability policy.
Yes. Yeah.
It's going to happen to you until it does.
Yeah.
So.
A lot of people, the number one reason I would say that people don't have cyber liability is because they think their business policy already has it. And it doesn't. And I would add to that on the business property, the key thing with business property, especially now, is there's a difference between business property insured on your premises at your workplace, and then also business property off premises. So you want to be sure that you have business property off premises, also in transit. Doesn't apply so much working for home, but we've a lot of clients who maybe you're a contractor and you're doing work, outside of your main place of business. You need property in transit and off premises, and it's not often not included.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned in the past 60 days?
I think the most surprising thing is how productive we are at home. In my office, so there's 13 of us right now. Like I said, half in the office, half at home. We are incredibly productive. And I have some agents who have multiple kids. They're homeschooling like all of us. I just give them so much credit, that we've been able to juggle this. So that, for me, that's been the most surprising. And I think a lot of businesses would agree. And I think I mentioned we have multiple office locations, and I'm taking a hard look at, do we really need, I'm surprised by how much our clients enjoy Zoom appointments. And it's working. We're so productive.
Excellent. Lucas, the same question to you, please.
In terms of, as it relates to insurance, what we're talking about before, this is actually a conversation that Ellie and I had in putting this together. The small businesses in this country and in this area in particular, they're resilient, they're entrepreneurial, and they're going to respond to this crisis in a way that makes sure that their businesses survive, that their families survive. And the thing that the purpose of all of this, in fact, in terms of like setting it up as a frequently asked questions, was to make sure that in your response to this crisis, in finding out the ways that you can survive, that it's shaped by knowledge of what happens with regards to your insurance policies. Now, insurance policies were written before this happened. So it's going to be just a mismatch because this isn't the routine sort of thing that happens. And given that we're out of our routine, we're just going to have to be more mindful about what our insurance coverage provides us. And you know, it's good that Ellie's out there making sure that they're going to give you a break on some of your premiums. She's going to work with you on that and making sure that you're aware of what it is that your coverage permits you to do. Now, you know, everyone's got to do what they have to do to make sure that their business survives, but you should do it with the knowledge of what risks you're actually taking.
Excellent. And the last question we have, there was talk of a class action lawsuits that the states were filing against the insurance companies. Can you provide a current status update on that?
I can, and I'll tell you, slow going. Like all litigation, it's going to be slow going. There's not any big updates right now, but there's just going to be, so this was actually, we talked about at the beginning when it comes to the business insurance, the business interruption insurance. There's just a coordinated effort to shift some of these losses over to the insurance companies. There's going to be the class action plaintiff bar that does that. And then it's going to be in the legislature too. And the only thing that I can tell you is that it's going to take a while to sort this out. And who knows where we will be left at the end of it. But like I said before, if you want to make sure that once this all settles and if it does in fact come out that you're entitled to some amount of some coverage under your business interruption policy coverage, then you want to make sure that you haven't prevented yourself from getting it by failing to make a claim.
Once again, we'd like to thank Ellie Platt of Platt Insurance and Lucas Blower from Rouse McDowell. We've provided really great information today for business owners. And if you have any parting comments before we sign off today?
Yeah, so we did on our website, plattinsurance.com, we did answer these questions as well as some additional questions in a nice little business guide. So if you go, it's right on our homepage, you'll be able to download, it's in yellow, download this guide. So in addition to answering more the questions, there's also many links that I referred to, a great article by Browse on cyber liability, the PPE exchange, you'll be able to find that on those links on the guide.
So this is wonderful. With that, we will be signing off today. And I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today on the webinar, helping you protect your tomorrows. It's a great tagline, Ellie.
Thanks.
Really enjoy that. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks, Ellie. Thanks, Lucas. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. See you later.